A very good morning. Today is 7 July 2020. There are 4 articles of the Hindu editorial. The first article is on India's foreign relation and the course of history. The second article is on rolling back the induced livelihood shock. The third article is on the Gangster of Kanpur, that is Vijay Dubey, who killed the policeman, and the collapsing of the rule of law. The next article is on WHO, how it seems a mercy and powerful, the failures of COVID-19 containment and the limit the number of deaths in the country. This is the article discussion. Before I begin, I am Prashant. I welcome you all to Wifi's study Karo. If you are first to my channel, please do subscribe so that you will not miss any updates. This is a cartoon of the day. As you can see from the picture, ICMR is approaching the people are running towards it. Regarding the coronavirus cases. The first article is on India's foreign relations and the course of history. The Prime Minister Modi public and undisguised reference to China's expansionism in his address to Indian troops last week on July 3rd in the Ladakh was so obvious that China lost no time in rejecting the allegation. As a proof of China's non-expansionism, their spokesman denying the charge said that China has signed boundary agreement with but 2 of its neighbors. In the tweet, that spokesperson said China had demarked the boundary with 12 of its 14 neighboring countries through peaceful negotiations, turning land border into bonds of friendly cooperation. Down memory lane, Mr. Modi deliberate and no doubt well thought out speech thus raised the questions on one's mind. Did he realize China's expansionism only after what had happened in eastern Ladakh in recent weeks, or he has had thoughts about China all along decided to give expression only to them? One can expect that Mr. Modi must be having the measure of Chinese President Xi Jinping during his many meetings with over the years. The Prime Minister talks of Chinese expansionism reminded that what Mr. Indira Gandhi told that once during that the Prime Minister office said. The author of this article says that the time down and the road in future when he might have a normal peaceful relations with Pakistan but never have China, because China basically is an expansionist power. She distrusted China as she did not other countries including the Soviet Union. She surely did not trust the Pakistan. Perhaps Indira Gandhi basically approach in foreign policy what that is international relations. There is no such thing as a trust. UN President Ronald Reagan told the trust but verify. Mr. Gandhi's approach seems to be verify and still not trust. Nehru, China and Kashmir. Jawaharlal Nehru, on the other hand, had convinced himself that China will not attack India. His defense minister at the time, V.V. Krishna, likely played a big part in the inclining Nehru towards the conviction. Regrettably, none of his advisors cautioned him against the miscalculation. Most of them had no experience in foreign relations. Nehru was not guided by any ideological considerations. Yes, he dreamt of India and him playing a big role on the world stage and believed that China could be a partner in the endeavor. Even the present government seems the India acting as a Vishwaguru. Whatsoever his reasons, there is no doubt that the China policy is hugely faulty. It would be healthy for all of us to admirers of Nehru, a rapidly dwindling tribe including India National Congress Party, to acknowledge this. But Nehru did not commit any Himalayan blunder in the Kashmir when a ceasefire was called on January 1949. It was not because he was pacificity but nature, and he trusted the United Nations or any other country the label Pakistani as aggressor and persuaded to vacate the aggression. By that time he had seen enough British duplicity and America's leveling the leads to Kashmir issue of the British. The reality of the ground was the Indian army was no position to run over the whole Jammu and Kashmir at the time. This has been defensively, defectively, conclusively brought out to respected scholars as well as official history of the war published by Defense Ministry several years later. Nor was Nehru influenced by any ideological basis. The author doesn't know that the fact that he was a leftist. He also says that he knows that he believes strongly in a foreign policy's national interest and only guiding principles. In his response to the letter Albert Einstein wrote to him a few weeks before the independence, Nehru described foreign policy as selfish. He also, in a clear mind, states that India's interests lay in the West. India needed technology and other assistance which he was convinced could be obtained from America. The Soviets, he believed, were no use in the matter. It was also that the American concluded that military agreement with Pakistan and started giving a massive quantities of arms that Nehru began looking to the Soviet Union. These mistakes, even the blunder over the China had committed, were caused by wrong assessments and not due to any ideological factors. Handling Pakistan, Mr. Gandhi had been similarly accused of being naive and too trusting when she allowed Pakistanis 90,000 prisoners of war, that is POWs, to return to their country without getting anything in return, but nobody mentioning what she could have asked in quid pro quo. She said that Pakistan to vacate the territory it had occupied in Jammu Kashmir after, and for how long should she have kept the Pakistan in the country until the Pakistan returned to its own territory. Again, at Simla, nobody could have stated that the conviction if she really believed that Pakistanis Ali would live up to his commitment. And this is regarding the India and Pakistan at the time of Indira Gandhi. The purpose of mentioning all above is not to exonerate any previous generations of the leadership. They must be held accountable for the mistakes or the blunders they might have committed. They acted in prevailing circumstances as best as they could, according to the perception of national interest. After all, the national interest is that which the government of a day decides it is. Or one government might conclude that civil nuclear deals with United States served Indian national interests. Some other government ruled by the same other party or even the same party, but at the other time and in different circumstances may think otherwise. But at the same time, at the token, Mr. Modi's conduct to Indian foreign policy surely does not allow any extraneous considerations of the influence as thinking and is biasing his approach by what he perceives as further our national interests. History will pronounce its analysis in due course of time. This article was penned by former Indian ambassador to United Nations and a special envoy for the West Asia in Manmohan Singh government. This is regarding Indian foreign relations and the codes of history. The next article is on rolling back the induced livelihood shock. For most regions across the country, the long lockdown has just got over. As an unlocking begins, it is becoming apparently increasing how the Indian state have chosen its side and revealed its elitist bias during one of the most stringently enforced lockdown worldwide. Several news reports and surveys on the plight of India's less privileged workforce during the lockdown have highlighted the massive scale of falling incomes and the loss of means of livelihood. Many have been pushed into various depths of poverty depending on how vulnerable their occupations were. Quantifying the likely scale of the poverty impacts that the lockdown was a more recent workforce suffered. The survey of data to estimate the lockdown-induced livelihood shock might have meant economically for different categories of the workers. This suggests some of the potential policy measures to prevent the shocks from further snowballing into chronic poverty. Pre-shock conundrum: India's poverty line has been a matter of contention for long. Its unrealistic low thresholds leading to conservative poverty numbers, irregularly updating the official poverty lines and availability of data and consumption expenditure of national sample survey in recent years have added into ambiguity around the poverty estimation in India. Accordingly to the household consumption, this poverty expenditure reported that the periodic labor force survey, that is PLFS 2017 to 2018, which replaces the employment unemployment surveys of National Sample Survey Office and applying states poverty lines used by the erstwhile Planning Commission in 2011 based on the Tendulkar Committee recommendations, adjusted with the current price indices. About 42% or around 56 crore people were officially poor before the lockdown, was announced, highlighting how closely packed people are towards the low half of consumption expenditure distribution. Another 20 crore people were with narrow band 20% above the poverty line in the most parts of the country. This amounts to be a few hundred rupees over the poverty. This amounts to be around 100 rupees, the threshold, a most modest dip in the earnings and hence a fall in the consumption spending would push a majority of them into the vortex of poverty and hunger, sucking up the large or entire chunks of modest incomes, and the lockdown gave a show. A poverty deepening. Our estimates from the PLFS data extrapolated for the years of 2020 suggest that about an additional 40 crore people were pushed to the low poverty line due to the lockdown. Around 12 crore of this lockdown induced newly poor and urban areas, and another 28 crore people in rural areas. Those who were already poor are going to suffer a further worsening in their quality of life, a phenomenon known as poverty deepening. Before the lockdown, around 16% of the population had a per capita consumption of expenditure of about a third of the poverty line, managing their daily expenses with rupees 30 per day or less than that. After the lockdown, this could swell more than 62 crore, that is 47% people pushed to such extreme poverty. A shock of such a scale is to be overwhelming majority of Indians in unprecedented of nation's living memory. Inadequate state responses. At such a juncture, a formal response of the state have been most inadequately or poorly conceived. The second economic stimulus package announced by the finance minister exposes the class of the current political dispensation more than ever. A keen increase of National Rural Employment Guarantee Act (NREGA), a wage of rupees 20 or from 180 to rupees 202 seems like a joke in the light of overall magnitude of the crisis. Undoubtedly, a revamped, expanded NREGA needs to be made at the fulcrum of the rural recharge. The demand for the work is anticipated to increase by 25% with reverse migration due to the rural labor supply. The revamped scheme would require providing 90 million workers guaranteed employment of 20 days of work in a month for at least next 6 months. This means that an additional financial stimulus of rupees 1.6 lakh crore. Universalization of the public demonstration or distribution system have been widely talked about. The needs of the latter, equity focus on implementation. Recent experiences of the expanding food coupons in the nation ration card holders in Delhi suggest that such measures are likely to exclude marginalized communities including Dalits and Muslims, the lowest status of and work hierarchy. At the local level, this could mean identification of the most vulnerable and including them into this program before expanding. It's relatively better off. The expulsion errors by IT-based attempts to coverage have a huge social cost in the form of existential hunger. Stabilizing the urban economy. Massive reverse migration flows out to urban informal sectors will force grinding hours and hiccups for the economy, limping back towards the normalcy of the post-lockdown scenarios. Given the magnitude of destabilization, an urban employment guarantee program becomes a dire necessity to stabilize the urban economy. A direct employment program implemented through municipal corporations could be introduced to guarantee 20 days of work. This can be used to develop a key social infrastructure in urban areas including slum development, drinking water supply, toilet construction, park and common areas, urban afforestation and social forestry. Such a facelift public workers programs can make the major difference in both condition of public utilities and absorption of spurt in the demand for the work in district towns and smaller cities in traditional out-migration hotspots across the country. These wages could be fixed to 30% premium over the prevalent MNREGA benchmark average wage in the state. An indirect branch of the program can also be used to encourage a revival of small and medium enterprises (SMEs) in the most permanent clusters. This could include employee contract facilitated programs to provide wage subsidy of the equivalent amount as a direct program to employees of urban SMEs or other business establishments and construction sectors. The neoliberal growth that we need to experience since 1990s have been largely through breaking the back of laboring class. The economy grew by paying less and less to the workers, allowing surplus to accumulate in the hands of owners of the means of production with the expansion or expectation that it could be reinvested. The states work systematically to this model flourish. A series of the policies made by laboring class increasing vulnerable, weakening their collective bargaining power, pushing them the way of their native towns out of the desperation, forcing them to accept the wage that is offered to them, making them to live in conditions with the takeaway of their sense of dignity and curtailing any social security benefiting that it could help them to survive in the times of difficulties. If we do not alter the course of economic progress and reorient development programs, the implications could be severe, with the increasing hunger-related deaths and destitution leading to social unrest and crime. This is regarding the rolling back of induced lively shocks, how it can be overcome. The next article is on a brutal killing regarding the rowdy sheeter. Gangster of Kanpur, the killing of 8 policemen by criminal gang in Kanpur in Uttar Pradesh on Friday bears a violent signature of dysfunctional society and alarming emaciation of government, a governance of India's most populous state. A history sheeter who had at least 5 dozen cases of murder, extortion, kidnapping and other violent crimes against him waited in ambush at his own home for arrival of the police party that was seeking to arrest him. One of the dead was early 20s and one had started his career and another was nearing his retirement. These were the needless and avoidable deaths. Reports suggest that the gangster had received information about impending raid of his sources within the police. The administration responded to the tragic setback by bulldozing the gang's leader's house and vehicles parked in the premises. Startling the word of government's contract, politics and crime, the gangster Vikas Dubey is emblematic of the nexus between the politics, crime and policing in many parts of the country. The circumstances that went into making of this incident and the response of the administration all point of the same morbid affliction that can be fatal to any democratic society: the collapse of the rule of the law. Criminal gangs shielded by the politics of the police of forces that bend to cast communal and political vested interests from the malevolent circuit that rewards its patterns. The police forces is coercive arm of the state, often the direct contact with the ordinary citizens. The quality of the policing therefore an outside impact on overall quality of governance. Poor training and alienating of dehumanizing work environment, corruption and lack of resources add to the crisis in policing. Politicians in the power often use the police the same way politicians out of the power use gangsters. Not surprisingly, there is times when police mirror in the character of the criminal gangs that chase down UP is not unique. But these maladies reveal themselves on horrifying scale of the state. Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath has also declared tough on crime policy, but this has sometimes meant that the police resort to shortcuts that subvert the legal courses. The state had around 5,178 encounters in which 103 suspects were killed and 17,000 surrendered in the last 2 years. Questionable coercive measures such as collective punishment and criminalization of political protest and suppression of the freedom of expression have been mainstreamed as a regular policing tool. The tragic loss of these own personnel in what should have been a routine law enforcement operation must fire up UP police to uphold professionalism, cleanse its ranks to corrupt and insufficient, and liberate the state from the fears of gangsters. The next article is on WHO, which seems to be at the mercy of powerful nations while obtaining relevant information. In a bid to cover up its own failures in COVID-19 containment and limit the number of deaths in country, US President Trump had accusing China in secrecy, deception and cover-up in the outbreak of World Health Organization of Chinese-centric. Mr. Trump could not have been known for it, but there is now evidence that WHO had not fully transparent during the early stages of the outbreak in Wuhan and China had indeed been more opaque than already known. If WHO have given impressions that December 31st China had alerted, the June 29th revised timeline of the world body clarifies the fact that great degree. WHO's country's office in China had apparently been alerted or altered by the media statement by Wuhan Municipal Health Commission about cases of viral phenomena. It got the same news from another independent sources too. China confirmed that to WHO of the cluster of cases of viral phenomena of unknown cause on January 3rd, only after the global body twice reached out of the Chinese authorities on Jan 1st to January 2nd. Following the confirmation, WHO on January 4th tweeted China had reported that WHO a cluster of phenomena cases with no deaths in Wuhan and Hubei province. Also, if the earlier timeline has mentioned that December 31st a novel coronavirus was eventually identified as a cause of phenomena cases, the revised information posted on WHO website mentions that the cause of illness was not known till January 2nd and China did not confirm novel coronavirus as a cause of even January 3rd when it confirmed a cluster of pneumonial cases. At least on 3 occasions, including the January 30 when the health emergency of international concern was declared, WHO had publicly praised China for its commitment to transparency, while it was also said that China was setting a new standard for outbreak response and called the quick sharing of whole genome sequence data of the virus is very impressive. Independent investigation revealed a different situation. China was not very forthcoming. The world knew a human-to-human transmission in China is only on January 20, and the global body was often kept in the dark. The scientific evidence strongly suggests that the outbreak began at least by early November. Apparently, WHO had to keep praising China so that it shared the information. Surely, the powerful nation cannot be allowed to endanger lives of another around the world by shrinking the responsibility. China had evidently refused to learn lessons from the disastrous handling of 2002 SARS outbreak. The current pandemic continues to infect millions, killing more than 530,000 and destroying livelihoods and the world economy. At least some of the impact could have been lessened by more proactive actions in the part of China and less attitude of the part of WHO. This is regarding WHO, which seems to be mercy and powerful nations while obtaining the relevant information. That's the end of article discussion. If you are new to my channel, please do subscribe. This is my Facebook, Instagram,